It's really a team. So obviously police officers, we go out in the field every day, we do our jobs, and we don't do it alone. Sometimes people don't see those partnerships that happen behind the scenes, and sometimes those partnerships are informal. Well, in this particular case, we've formalized these partnerships, and it's a very coordinated and specific approach. So on average, the Cranston Police Department responds about 80,000 calls for service a year. And usually you only hear about the arrests that take place, and believe it or not, we only make about 2,000 arrests a year, which is about 2.5% of our calls. But often that's all you see is that part of what we do. So it's a very small part of the enforcement. The arrest part of it is very small in comparison to the daily calls where we go out and we help people. And I don't know a single police officer that I interviewed when they were in the room trying to get on the department. And one of the first things I ask them is why they want to become a police officer. And so far, I've never heard somebody say, I want to make a lot of arrests. Usually, they say they want to come out and they want to help people and be part of their community. So I just wanted to mention that. So when I first came here, we started to dig deep into some of the data that we had. We realized that out of those 80,000 calls, often we were responding to the same address over and over and over again. And that was tying up significant police services. So we started to analyze and look deeper into why we're going to these locations. A lot of times it was calls for quality of life, but when we got there, we realized we wanted to analyze the underlying reason why we're going to these locations. And a lot of times it was a mental health related situation. Sometimes it was people experiencing tough economic times, and other times it was substance abuse issues. So we would go there, we'd take a report, we would take a person down to the emergency room sometimes if they were in a mental health crisis, and a few hours later they were back home in their community with no treatment plan, if you will, and we were back at that house multiple times over and over again. So we were really spinning our wheels. We weren't really getting to the underlying issues or solving the underlying issues or treating those issues. So we wanted to do something more. So then fast forward to the pandemic, we all know that that increased a lot of stressors in the community. A lot of people became homeless as a result. There's difficult inflation right now. There's homeless encampments that have popped up in Cranston. We have Harrington Hall, a shelter in our city. A lot of people, not only they falling upon tough economic times, they're coupled with mental health issues as well. So they're getting hit with different aspects of that, and we wanted to do more. So we ended up training our officers in mental health first aid. Every single officer gets that training and in service. And that teaches officers how to recognize the basic signs and symptoms of mental illness and how to de-escalate those situations when they arrive on a scene like that, when they're dealing with those individuals. So we wanted to even take it a step further, and we formed a crisis intervention team. And that's 8 specially trained officers who undergo 40 hours of additional training on how to de-escalate and handle those situations where we have to use force less and hopefully not at all. So we've done that, and we have 8 more officers who will be trained by the end of next month. So we went under, some of these officers are here today, 2 officers here. These officers volunteered for these assignments. They're officers that are very compassionate, that want to do the follow-up. So we analyze all our calls for service on a weekly basis with the clinicians from Gateway and CCAP, and then we decide on doing outreach efforts to those locations. And we go there. They're in these uniforms. They're not the typical uniforms on purpose, similar to the HOPE initiative, if you're familiar with that. And we go as a team, and we try to help those individuals, provide them either social services, mental health options, if they need to be hospitalized inpatient. Fortunately, Gateway and CCAP have the ability to arrange for those services where we're going out to them. We're meeting them where they are versus waiting for something to happen. So we're doing those outreaches 3 times a week with the officers and the clinicians. So we're really excited about where we're at right now. We're doing this with CARES Act money that was passed by Congress in 2020. So it's funding the program right now. We're excited that Senator Whitehouse is in the process of introducing legislation in Washington that will actually do what we're doing here, actually fund what we're doing here and expand it. There's different models out there. Some cities are experimenting with programs where calls are diverted away from police departments. We chose not to go that route. We feel we have a great relationship with the community that we serve. We believe that we can leverage those partnerships and the trust we have in the community to have better outcomes. And what worries me about diverting calls away from the police, there's safety issues sometimes. People undergoing mental crisis at times can be unpredictable, and it can lead to a dangerous situation. And most times when we go to those calls, the call comes in as some other type of call. You can't really carve it out, if you will. And then we show up, and it turns out to be a completely different situation. So we believe, you know, in this approach over eliminating and taking police officers out of the equation. We've had great success so far with the program. You're going to hear a couple stories today about those successes. I'm really proud of the partnership that we have. We're fortunate to have that as the second largest city. I know other places have CIT programs, but this partnership, I think, is a little bit special, and it's something that's a priority for me and Mayor Hopkins' administration to show the other side of law enforcement and help people in our community. And just in a short period of time, we've seen a decrease in the number of calls for service, and that was part of the idea as well, and people are getting the help that they need. And I know some of those calls that we talked about before, we were going to the same house over and over again. We're not seeing repeat calls because we've addressed the underlying issues through treatment programs and other social services. So I'm going to introduce Captain Dutra, who will continue to talk about the program.
Before you hand it off,
yes.
Colonel, can you just go back a second? Say the 8 additional officers are going to complete their training next week?
At the end of next month. So we have 8 now, and our goal is to get another 8. So a certain percentage of officers within the patrol division will have this training, which is important because they're the first responders to these calls.
And is it the people from Gateway and CCAP that do the training?
They are part of the training. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they can talk about a little more about the training. But yes, they do the training, and I believe other experts come in to help. Okay. Any other question before I turn it over to Captain Dutra? Okay, Captain.
Thank you. I'm just going to take a few minutes here to speak about my position here in the police department, I am the community outreach captain. So the CIT program does fall under my command. I am not a crisis intervention officer. I'm more of a behind-the-scenes administrator. I oversee multiple initiatives that we're working with here in the police department. In January of this year, Colonel Winquist approached me as there was a vacancy here in the police department from a retirement, and he offered me a position here as the community outreach captain. I moved from a different position within the department, and his idea was to expand upon community outreach here in the city. And so at that point, he assigned me a sergeant, which he took out of the patrol division, and an inspector, rank of officer, to work in that unit with me, and has subsequently given me an additional officer, Officer Joe Alfonso, who's standing here to my left. So the colonel has expanded the unit since the beginning of the year from 1 person to a 4-person unit. So I think it speaks volumes to where the city's moving and where we see the need to go. It's always a big decision for an administration to reallocate staff from a patrol division where it could cause overtime and things of that sort to move them to another division like this. So I really do think it says a lot to the direction that the Cranston Police Department is moving and what our priorities are here and kind of our new way of looking at crime and quality of life issues and how to address them. So we saw the need for this expansion, and we wanted this more streamlined approach to outreach. So like I said, we began multiple initiatives, and this CIT program has been one of my priorities in the community outreach division, is really taking this program that was already in the works and kind of streamlining it, organizing it, and getting it to a well-oiled machine where we could, from the patrol officer to making that initial call for service to generating the proper information in the police reports, and supervisors in our patrol division following up on those reports and getting them assigned to crisis intervention officers who then can evaluate the report and work with Gateway and CCAP to see what type of services are appropriate, and then we can manage the follow-ups. So we were doing a lot of these things prior, but this new program and this new office has really kind of streamlined the process, so nobody gets lost in the mix. And through that, part of that streamlined process was we created a crime class number that we assign. These aren't crimes, but we call them crime class here in police language, police talk. So we created a call number that's assigned to all these police reports. So that's going to make it easier for us to track at the end of the year all our mental health service calls, our follow-ups, and our success rate. Because like the Colonel had mentioned, a lot of times these calls are coming in as a well-being check, maybe a suspicious person, or an issue with somebody's property that seems to be, the grass is overgrown, broken windows. The officers go out, they conduct a quick initial investigation, and then they may determine it's a quality of life crisis or it's a mental health crisis. And at that point, we reclassify that call with one of our mental health crisis response numbers. So it's going to make us easy to track our successes and see if the program is working and where we need to shift resources and what we have to do. So through the use of this crisis intervention team, I mean, we're really able to identify what's going on, really get to the specifics on the matter, and try to identify who the professionals are that are best tasked to resolve this issue so we can eliminate these multiple callbacks. In the past 2 months since we started, I think it was February 7th, Joe? So we started the follow-up outreaches on February 7th, and to date we've generated well over 100 of these police report numbers, crisis intervention report numbers, and we've conducted over 50 outreaches out in the field, teamed up with our police officers and our crisis intervention clinicians from Gateway and CCAP. So in 2 months' time, I think the numbers speak to themselves. There's a need for the program, there's a need for this partnership, and and we hope that it continues. We hope that we're able to secure more grant funding in the future and more training in the future to expand this program. That way we don't miss anybody. We don't want to let anybody fall through the cracks. I think the more people we can outreach and the more people we can help, the better.